The heavens had opened with fury that spring day in 1875, turning the peaceful valley of Silvercreek, Colorado, into a treacherous expanse of rising water. Through the deluge, Eleanor Richards stood alone in what had once been her family's wheat field, her skirts heavy with mud and rainwater, her sobs blending with the thunder that rolled across the darkened sky. Eleanor's tears weren't for the ruined crops that represented months of labor. They were for the broken promises and shattered dreams that had led her to this moment of absolute despair. 22 years of life hadn't prepared her for such complete abandonment. She hadn't noticed the approaching rider until the splash of hooves cutting through knee-deep water caught her attention. Through the curtain of rain, she made out the silhouette of a man on horseback, moving deliberately toward her through the flooded field. "Miss, what in God's name are you doing out here?" The voice carried above the storm's roar. Eleanor could barely speak, her body shivering violently from cold and emotion. "Leave me be," she managed, turning away from the stranger. The rider urged his horse closer, and Eleanor could now see him clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with rain cascading off the brim of his worn Stetson. His eyes, a piercing blue, studied her with concern beneath the shadow of his hat. "I can't do that, miss. This water's rising fast." Flash floods coming down from the mountains. He extended a gloved hand toward her. "I'm Adam Jenkins. My ranch is on higher ground just 2 miles east. Let me take you there." "My home is gone," Eleanor whispered, more to herself than to him. "Everything is gone." Without further discussion, Adam leaned down from his saddle and in one fluid motion gathered Eleanor into his arms, lifting her onto his horse. She was too exhausted to protest as he settled her in front of him, one strong arm securing her against his chest while the other held the reins. "Hold tight," he instructed, turning his horse toward the eastern ridge. "Storm's not done with us yet." The powerful chestnut gelding surged forward through the rising waters, carrying them away from the flooded valley. Eleanor closed her eyes, the warmth of the stranger's body the first comfort she'd felt in days. She didn't know this man, this Adam Jenkins, but as consciousness began to fade, she realized she had little choice but to trust him. For Adam, the decision to ride out during the worst spring storm in memory had been instinctive. When old Jasper Miller had mentioned seeing a woman walking toward the Richards homestead that morning, a property everyone knew had been abandoned after Timothy Richards' death, last winter, something had compelled him to investigate, despite his foreman's protests. Now, with the unconscious woman secured against him, Adam urged his horse faster up the muddy trail toward Whisper Creek Ranch. Lightning split the sky ahead, illuminating the sprawling ranch house that represented 5 years of hard work since he'd arrived in Colorado with nothing but determination, and the skills he'd honed during his years as a cattle driver. "Almost there," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Her skin felt cold against his hand, her breathing shallow. The rain had plastered her honey-brown hair to her face and neck, revealing delicate features now pale with exhaustion. By the time Adam reached the ranch house, his housekeeper, Mrs. Abigail Foster, was already waiting on the covered porch, her face pinched with worry. "Good heavens, Mr. Jenkins. Who is that poor creature?" she called as Adam dismounted, carefully bringing Eleanor down with him. "Don't know her name yet," Adam replied, carrying the unconscious woman toward the house. "Found her standing in the middle of Richard's flooded field, half drowned and out of her mind with grief." Mrs. Foster hurried ahead, already issuing instructions. "Bring her to the guest room. I'll heat water and find dry clothes." Adam laid Eleanor gently on the bed in his best guest room, stepping back as Mrs. Foster shooed him away. Go change your own clothes before you catch your death, Mr. Jenkins. I'll tend to the young lady." An hour later, Adam sat before the roaring fireplace in his study, a glass of whiskey warming his hands. The storm continued to rage outside, wind howling around the eaves of the solidly built ranch house. His mind kept returning to the woman upstairs who was she, and what desperate circumstances had brought her to stand alone in a flooded field during the worst storm of the season. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Foster entered, her normally stern face softened with concern. "She's awake, sir. Name's Eleanor Richards, says she's Timothy Richards' daughter, come from Boston after receiving news of her father's passing." Adam frowned. Richards' daughter? Nobody knew he had family back east. Apparently he did. Poor thing arrived on yesterday's stage to find her father's homestead abandoned and partially collapsed. Says she spent the night there, only to wake to rising waters this morning. "Timothy Richards has been dead these 3 months, Adam said, setting down his glass. "Why is she only arriving now? Says the letter took weeks to reach her, and she came as soon as she could. She's asking to speak with you to thank you, I expect." Adam nodded and followed Mrs. Foster upstairs. In the doorway of the guest room he paused. Eleanor Richards sat propped against pillows, her damp hair combed back from her face. She wore one of Mrs. Foster's nightgowns, several sizes too large for her slender frame. Despite her ordeal, there was a quiet dignity in her posture, a resilience that immediately commanded Adam's respect. "Miss Richards," he said, entering the room, "I'm glad to see you're awake." Her eyes, a warm amber he hadn't noticed during the storm, met his directly. "Mr. Jenkins, your housekeeper tells me you risked your own safety to rescue me. I'm deeply grateful. Any man would have done the same." A shadow of something bitterness perhaps crossed her face. "I have recent evidence to the contrary, sir. Nevertheless, I thank you." Adam moved closer, taking the chair beside her bed. "Mrs. Foster tells me you're Timothy Richards' daughter. I knew your father slightly. I'm sorry for your loss." Eleanor's hands twisted in the bed covers. "Did you know him well?" "I haven't seen my father since I was 12 years old, when he sent me to live with my mother's sister in Boston after my mother died. Can't say I knew him well. He kept to himself mostly, worked his land alone." Adam hesitated, unsure how much to tell this exhausted young woman about her father's final years. He was respected in the community. "And yet he died alone," Eleanor said softly, "with no one to write to me until the pastor thought to check his personal papers." She looked up suddenly, as if remembering herself. "Forgive me. I shouldn't burden you with family matters." "No burden, Miss Richards, but you should rest now. We can talk more in the morning." Eleanor nodded, fatigue evident in every line of her body. "Mr. Jenkins, what will happen to me now?" "My father's home is clearly uninhabitable, and I have nowhere else to go in Silvercreek." The question caught Adam off guard. He was unaccustomed to making decisions that affected anyone but himself and his ranch hands. Yet something about Eleanor Richards' direct gaze and quiet dignity made him unwilling to offer mere platitudes. "You'll stay here until you're well, and then we'll figure out the next steps together," he said finally. "Silvercreek's a small town, but folks look after their own. And your father's land, there may be legal matters to address regarding your inheritance." "Inheritance?" Eleanor gave a small, humorless laugh. "From what I saw today, there's little left to inherit, but thank you for your kindness, Mr. Jenkins. I won't impose on you longer than necessary." "Get some rest, Miss Richards. Things often look brighter in the morning." As Adam closed the door behind him, he wondered what had possessed him to make such an open-ended offer to a woman he'd only just met. Whisper Creek Ranch was his sanctuary, built through years of solitary determination after he'd left behind the violence and chaos of his youth. He rarely invited guests, preferring the company of his horses and the handful of loyal ranch hands who knew better than to pry into his past. Yet something about Eleanor Richards had touched him, perhaps the quiet grief in her eyes that mirrored his own buried sorrows, or the dignity with which she faced her uncertain future. Whatever the reason, Adam Jenkins found himself uncharacteristically concerned with the fate of Timothy Richards' daughter. The next morning dawned clear and brilliant, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Adam rose early, as was his habit, and walked his property to assess the damage. The creek that gave his ranch its name had swollen to 3 times its normal size, but was already receding. Some fencing would need repair, and one of the smaller outbuildings had lost part of its roof, but overall, Whisper Creek had weathered the storm well. When he returned to the house, he found Eleanor in the kitchen with Mrs. Foster, dressed in a simple blue dress that the housekeeper had altered overnight. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," Eleanor said, rising from her seat at the kitchen table. "I hope I'm not intruding on your breakfast routine." "Not at all." Adam removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his mud-splattered boots and work clothes. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Much better, thank you. Mrs. Foster has been very kind." The housekeeper bustled about, placing a plate of eggs and bacon before Adam. "Miss Richards has been telling me about Boston. Sounds like quite a civilized place compared to our little corner of Colorado." Eleanor smiled politely. "Different, certainly, but each has its charms. Mr. Jenkins, I was hoping you might advise me on my father's property. I should return there today to salvage what I can." Adam shook his head as he took his seat. "I rode by the lower valley on my way back. The Richards homestead is still standing, but the water's up to the porch. It'll be days before you can safely return." Eleanor's face fell, though she quickly composed herself. "I see. Then I should inquire about accommodations in town. Perhaps there's a boarding house." "Nonsense," Mrs. Foster interrupted. "You'll stay right here until your property is accessible, won't she, Mr. Jenkins?" Adam found himself nodding before he'd fully considered the implications. "Of course. You're welcome here, Miss Richards, for as long as necessary." "That's very generous, but I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," Adam said, surprised by his own firmness. "Besides, there's something you should know about your father's property." Eleanor tensed visibly. "What about it?" "After your father died, there was some confusion about the land. No one knew he had an heir, and the county was preparing to auction the property for back taxes." "Back taxes? But surely my father—" "Times were hard these past few years. Drought followed by early frosts. Many farmers struggled." Adam hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I paid those taxes, Miss Richards." Eleanor stared at him. "You paid my father's tax debt." "Why would you do that for a man you barely knew?" Adam set down his fork, choosing his words carefully. "Your father's land borders my eastern pasture. It's good bottomland when it's not flooded. I plan to bid on it at auction, expand my grazing area." "I see." Eleanor's voice had cooled noticeably. "So you were simply protecting your investment. Business is business, Miss Richards. But now that you're here, that changes things." "Does it?" Her amber eyes held his steadily. "You've paid the taxes, which I presume gives you some legal claim to the property." "I have a receipt from the county, yes, but I never intended to take advantage of a situation if heirs came forward." Eleanor stood, smoothing the borrowed dress with trembling hands. "Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate your candor. If you'll excuse me, I need some air." After she left, Mrs. Foster gave Adam a reproachful look. "That could have been handled more delicately, sir." Adam sighed, pushing away his half-eaten breakfast. "I've never been one for delicate conversations, Mrs. Foster." "Better she knows the situation clearly." That girl has lost everything, traveled across the country only to find her father dead and her inheritance underwater. A little gentleness wouldn't go amiss. Adam found Eleanor on the front porch, staring out at the distant mountains. He approached cautiously, aware that his presence might not be welcome. "Miss Richards, I've upset you. That wasn't my intention." She didn't turn. "You've been nothing but kind, Mr. Jenkins. I'm simply adjusting to my circumstances. Your father's land rightfully belongs to you. I'll sign whatever papers are needed to relinquish any claim from the tax payment." Now she did turn, studying his face as if searching for deception. "Why would you do that? You said yourself it was a business decision." "It was, but things change." Adam leaned against the porch railing. "What will you do with the property, if I may ask? Farming isn't easy work, especially for someone alone." "I haven't decided. I taught school in Boston, but I doubt Silvercreek needs another teacher. Actually, we've been without one since Miss Winters married the blacksmith last fall. Town council's been looking to hire someone before the fall term." Hope flickered across Eleanor's face. "Really, that would solve many problems. The pay isn't much, but combined with leasing your farmland, you could live comfortably enough." "Leasing? To whom?" "To me, if you're amenable. I could use that bottomland for hay production. Would save me buying feed come winter." Eleanor considered this, her practical nature asserting itself. "That sounds reasonable, assuming the land is still viable after the flood." "It will be. Floods bring new soil, make the land richer." Adam offered a small smile. "Your father picked good property. He knew land, even if he struggled to work at these last years." For the first time, Eleanor's expression softened. "Tell me about him, the man he became out here." "My memories are of a different father from before." "Before he sent you away?" Adam finished gently. Eleanor nodded. "He was kind once, full of laughter. After Mother died of fever, something in him changed. He became distant. When he announced I was being sent to Boston to an aunt I barely knew, I thought it was punishment for something I'd done. Grief affects people differently. Perhaps he thought he was giving you your best chance." "Perhaps." Eleanor didn't sound convinced. "But why didn't he ever visit?" 10 years without a word, then occasional letters with money enclosed. No explanations, no invitations to return. Adam had no answer that wouldn't sound like empty consolation. Instead, he offered what he knew. "Your father was respected here. Quiet, kept to himself, but honest in his dealings. He'd help neighbors when needed, loaned equipment, shared water rights during dry spells. Wasn't much for socializing, though. Never saw him at church socials or town gatherings." Eleanor absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with her childhood memories. "Thank you for telling me this. It helps somehow to know he found a place here, even if he chose to be alone." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of cattle and the gentle spring breeze. Adam found himself studying Eleanor's profile, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the gentle curve of her mouth that hinted at a smile rarely used. "If you're feeling up to it," he said finally, "I could show you around the ranch today. Give you a better sense of your neighbor, since it seems we'll be conducting business together." Eleanor turned to him, and this time a genuine smile touched her lips. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Jenkins." "Adam," he corrected. "If we're to be neighbors and business partners, you might as well use my given name." "Then you must call me Eleanor," she replied. "Miss Richards makes me feel like a schoolmarm before I've even applied for the position." Adam laughed, a sound that surprised even him with its ease. "Fair enough, Eleanor. We'll start after lunch once the grounds had more time to dry." The tour of Whisper Creek Ranch became Eleanor's first glimpse into the man who had rescued her. Adam Jenkins was clearly respected by his workers, who tipped their hats deferentially when he approached, but weren't afraid to joke with him. He knew every horse by name, every acre of his property intimately, and spoke with quiet pride about the breeding program he'd established for quarter horses. "You've built something remarkable here," Eleanor observed as they stood on a ridge overlooking the main pasture where dozens of horses grazed. "How long have you been in Colorado?" "5 years," Adam replied. "Started with just 50 acres and 6 horses. Worked cattle drives to earn cash for expansion. And before Colorado," a shadow crossed his face. "Texas mainly, moved around a lot after the war." Eleanor sensed his reluctance to elaborate and didn't press. Everyone in this new Western world seemed to have a past they preferred not to discuss, herself included. Her years in Boston held memories she was equally hesitant to revisit. They rode to the boundaries of his property, which eventually brought them within sight of her father's homestead. From this distance, Eleanor could see that the floodwaters had indeed receded somewhat, though the fields remained submerged. "Your father built that house himself," Adam said, noting her gaze. "Solid construction. Once the water's gone and it's had time to dry out, it should be habitable again with some work." "You think I should live there?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "Don't you want to?" Eleanor considered the distant homestead, trying to imagine herself living alone in those remote surroundings. "I don't know. It feels like my father's place, not mine, and yet it's all I have left of him." "You don't have to decide today," Adam reminded her. "Or even this month, stay at Whisper Creek until you're ready." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that his offer went beyond mere neighborly courtesy. For Adam, the realization that he didn't want Eleanor Richards to leave came as an unexpected complication to what should have been a simple rescue and temporary hospitality. The next weeks established a rhythm to their days. Eleanor rode into town with Adam to meet the town council, who enthusiastically offered her the teaching position for the fall term. She visited her father's property several times as the waters receded, salvaging personal items and assessing what repairs would be needed to make the homestead livable again. In the evenings at Whisper Creek, she and Adam would often sit on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset while she told him about her teaching experiences in Boston, and he shared stories of cattle drives and the early days of building his ranch. Neither spoke much about deeper personal matters, an unspoken agreement to respect the boundaries each had established. Mrs. Foster observed their growing friendship with quiet approval, noting how Adam's habitual solemnity had given way to occasional laughter, and how Eleanor's guarded expressions had softened into genuine smiles. One evening in late May, as they sat together on the porch, Adam finally asked the question that had been on his mind since Eleanor's arrival. "You mentioned once that you have evidence not all men would have helped you during the flood. What did you mean by that?" Eleanor stiffened almost imperceptibly. "It was nothing. A poor choice of words, Eleanor." Adam's voice was gentle but insistent. "In the month you've been here, you've never mentioned family or friends in Boston other than the aunt who raised you. You came west alone, which few unmarried women would do without serious cause." She was silent for so long that Adam thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible above the evening chorus of crickets. "I was engaged to be married in Boston. To a man named Charles Harrington, from a respected family. We were to be wed this spring." She paused, her fingers nervously twisting the simple silver ring she wore on her right hand, not her left. Adam had noticed. "When my father's letter arrived, informing me of his death and suggesting I might want to see to his property, Charles was displeased. He saw no reason for me to travel west, especially with our wedding approaching. But you insisted, Adam surmised. Eleanor nodded. My father and I may have been estranged, but he was still my father. I felt I owed him this final respect, to at least see his final home and ensure his affairs were properly settled. A reasonable position. Charles didn't think so. He gave me an ultimatum: postpone the trip until after our wedding, or consider our engagement ended. Eleanor's voice hardened. I chose the latter. No man who truly loved me would ask me to disregard my family obligations, however complicated they might be. That explains why you came west, but not why you were standing alone in a flooded field during a thunderstorm. Adam observed quietly. Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears. When I arrived in Silvercreek and found my father's homestead abandoned, I went to the church to speak with the pastor who had written to me. He explained that my father had died months earlier, that most of his personal effects had been sold to cover funeral expenses, and that the property would likely be auctioned for taxes. She took a deep breath before continuing. It was as if everything I had sacrificed, my position at the school, my engagement, my life in Boston, had been for nothing. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I spent that night in my father's cold, empty house, surrounded by the few possessions that remained, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. And the next morning the flood came, Adam finished. Yes. I woke to water seeping under the door. I grabbed what I could and waded outside, but the water kept rising. I made it to higher ground in the field, but then I simply couldn't move anymore. It was as if all the grief and fear I'd been holding back finally overwhelmed me. She wiped a tear from her cheek. Then you appeared, like some apparition from a novel. Adam reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. I'm glad I found you, Eleanor. The simple sincerity in his voice broke something loose inside her. The tears she'd been fighting spilled over, and for the first time since arriving in Colorado, Eleanor Richards allowed herself to truly grieve for her father, for her abandoned future in Boston, for the lost years that could never be reclaimed. Adam moved to kneel beside her chair, his arm around her shoulders as she cried. He said nothing, offering only his presence and the steady strength that had become her anchor in this new world. When her tears finally subsided, Eleanor became acutely aware of their proximity, of Adam's arm still around her shoulders and her hand still clasped in his. She should pull away. She knew propriety demanded it. Yet she found herself unwilling to break this moment of connection. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to burden you with all this. No burden, Adam replied, echoing his words from their first meeting. His blue eyes, usually so guarded, were warm with an emotion Eleanor dared not name. Eleanor, the moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Adam stood quickly, his expression shifting back to its customary reserve as a rider appeared in the gathering dusk. Evening, boss, called Ethan, one of the younger ranch hands. Sheriff Wilson's in town looking for you. Says there's trouble with the Kelsey brothers again. Adam's jaw tightened. Tell him I'll be there first thing tomorrow. Said it was urgent, sir. They've been threatening Henderson over water rights again. With a barely suppressed sigh, Adam turned to Eleanor. I need to handle this. Henderson's an elderly farmer whose property borders the Kelsey ranch. Brothers have been trying to intimidate him into selling for months. Of course, Eleanor said, already feeling the loss of their interrupted moment. You should go. Adam hesitated, clearly torn. We'll continue our conversation when I return. But by the time Adam returned late that night, the house was dark, and the moment, whatever it might have become, had passed. The following days brought a subtle shift in their relationship. Both were more careful, more conscious of maintaining proper boundaries, as if their brief emotional intimacy had awakened them to the dangers of the path they were treading. Adam threw himself into ranch work, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark, while Eleanor devoted herself to preparing for her teaching position and making plans for restoring her father's homestead. It was Mrs. Foster who finally intervened, cornering Adam in his study one evening in early June. "Whatever you've done to upset Miss Richards, you'd best fix it," she announced without preamble. Adam looked up from his ledgers, frowning. "I haven't done anything to upset her." "Precisely the problem, I suspect." The housekeeper fixed him with a knowing stare. "That young woman has been a blessing to this household, Mr. Jenkins. She's brought light and conversation where there was only work and silence, and I've seen how you look at her when you think no one's watching." "Mrs. Foster, I appreciate your concern, but my relationship with Miss Richards is none of your— forgive an old woman for speaking plainly, but you're both being fools. Life doesn't offer many chances for real happiness, especially out here. When such a chance appears, only a fool would let pride or fear stand in the way." With that parting wisdom, she left Adam to his thoughts. The next morning, Adam found Eleanor in the garden, helping Mrs. Foster harvest early vegetables. The sight of her hair tied back with a simple ribbon, sleeves rolled up, face flushed with exertion stirred something profound in him. She looked up as his shadow fell across the garden row, her expression guarded. "Good morning, Adam. I didn't expect to see you until dinner." "I thought we might ride out to your father's property today," he said without preamble. "The water's fully receded now. We could assess what repairs are needed." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at Mrs. Foster, who made a shooing motion with her hands. "Go on, dear. These peas can wait." The ride to the Richards homestead was quiet, both of them aware of the unfinished conversation that hung between them. When they arrived, Eleanor was relieved to see that the flood damage wasn't as extensive as she'd feared. The house still stood sturdy on its stone foundation, though mud and debris covered the floors and lower walls. "It's salvageable," Adam said, examining the structure. "Needs new flooring in places, fresh plaster painting. Could be ready by fall if we start soon." Eleanor questioned. "My men and I could help with the heavy work. Town folks might pitch in two communities good about helping neighbors rebuild after disasters." "That's very generous, but I'm not sure, Eleanor." Adam turned to face her directly. "Have I done something to offend you?" "You've been distant since the other night." She looked away. "Of course not. I've simply been preoccupied with planning my future. A future that seems increasingly separate from Whisper Creek Ranch. I can't impose on your hospitality forever. It's not an imposition if you're welcome." Adam stepped closer. "If you're wanted." The intensity in his voice made Eleanor meet his gaze. "Adam, let me speak plainly, Eleanor. When I found you in that flooded field, I thought I was simply doing what any decent man would do. I didn't expect." He faltered, then continued with determination. "I didn't expect you to become so important to me." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Important how? In every way that matters." Adam took her hands in his. "I know you came here with no intention of staying. I know you've had plans and dreams disrupted. But I'm asking you to consider a new dream, one that includes Whisper Creek and me. Adam, we've known each other barely 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, I've come to know you better than people I've worked alongside for years. I know your courage, your intelligence, your kind heart. I know how you face challenges directly, how you find humor even in difficult situations, how you've transformed a lonely ranch house into a home." Eleanor felt tears threatening again. "You make me sound far better than I am." "I'm not finished." Adam's hands tightened around hers. I also know you're still healing from betrayal, still finding your place in this new world. I'm not asking for promises or commitments today. I'm asking for a chance for both of us to see if what I feel growing between us might become something lasting. And what if it doesn't? Eleanor whispered. What if I rebuild this house, begin teaching, and we discover we've mistaken gratitude and proximity for deeper feelings? Then we'll part as friends, and I'll always be your neighbor and ally. Adam's blue eyes held her steadily. But I don't think that's what will happen, Eleanor. I think you feel this too, this connection between us that defies simple explanation. Eleanor couldn't deny it. From the moment Adam had carried her from the flood waters, something had drawn her to this quiet, strong man with his hidden depths and careful words. It wasn't the desperate attachment of a rescued victim, nor was it mere gratitude. It was recognition of a kindred spirit, a complementary soul. I do feel it, she admitted softly. But it frightens me, Adam. I've already lost so much, risked so much to come here. Then let's take this slowly, he suggested. No declarations, no promises yet, just honesty between us as we see where this leads. Eleanor studied his face, the earnest blue eyes. The strong lines softened now with vulnerability as he awaited her answer. This wasn't Charles Harrington's smooth, practiced courtship, nor was it a desperate plea from a lonely rancher. It was an invitation to explore something genuine, something that had begun in flood waters and grown in the quiet evenings of shared conversation. Yes, she said finally. Let's see where this leads. The smile that transformed Adam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, sudden, brilliant, and full of promise. Their courtship unfolded through the summer months, as deliberate and thoughtful as the people involved. 3 days each week, Adam would bring men from his ranch to help rebuild Eleanor's homestead, transforming the flood-damaged structure into a comfortable home. Eleanor divided her time between preparing for the upcoming school term and learning the basics of Western housekeeping from Mrs. Foster, who had appointed herself mentor to the Eastern-educated young woman. In the evenings, Adam and Eleanor would often ride together, exploring the valley and foothills surrounding their properties. During these rides, their conversations deepened, carefully navigating toward the personal histories both had initially kept guarded. Eleanor learned that Adam had fought for the Union during the war, though he spoke little of those years. Afterward, unable to face returning to his family's small farm in Pennsylvania, he had drifted west, working cattle drives in Texas, before a chance opportunity brought him to Colorado. I was escorting a herd to Denver when I passed through this valley, he told her as they rested their horses beside a mountain stream. Something about this land spoke to me, the way the mountains cradle the valley, the quality of the light at sunset. I knew this was where I wanted to put down roots. After years of wandering, Eleanor observed, you were ready for home. Adam nodded, absently stroking his horse's neck. I think I was running from memories for a long time. The war changes a man, Eleanor. Makes him see things, do things that haunt him afterward. Is that why you live so far from town, from people, partly? Adam met her eyes directly. But isolation isn't the answer. I've learned that since you came. Eleanor reached across the space between their horses and touched his hand. I'm glad. I wouldn't want to care for a man who preferred solitude to connection. Care for, Adam echoed, a smile touching his lips. Eleanor blushed but didn't look away. Yes, Adam, I care for you, more than I thought possible in such a short time. It was the closest either had come to a declaration, and Adam's response was to lean across the gap between them and kiss her softly at first, then with growing intensity as Eleanor responded. When they finally parted, both were breathing quickly, surprised by the power of their mutual attraction. I should take you home, Adam said reluctantly. "Before I forget, I'm trying to be a gentleman." Eleanor laughed, her face still flushed. "Perhaps we both need reminding of proper behavior, but Adam," she held his gaze, "I don't regret a moment of this day." By August, Eleanor's homestead was sufficiently restored for habitation, though she had yet to move from Whisper Creek. The upcoming start of the school term provided a convenient reason to delay the decision, but both she and Adam knew the true reason was their reluctance to end the daily closeness they had come to cherish. The town's annual Founders' Day celebration in mid-August marked a turning point. The entire community gathered for a day of festivities, competitions, and an evening dance. Eleanor, now known to most as the new schoolteacher, found herself warmly welcomed by the townspeople of Silvercreek. "Miss Richards, we're so pleased you'll be teaching our children, Mrs. Henderson said, introducing her young son and daughter. "They've been without proper schooling since Miss Winters left us." "I'm looking forward to meeting all my students," Eleanor replied warmly. "Will you be at the school picnic next week? I'd like to meet the families before classes begin." As Eleanor circulated through the crowd, she was struck by the sense of community that permeated Silvercreek, so different from the formal social circles of Boston, yet in many ways more genuine. These people knew real hardship, depended on each other through harsh winters and failed crops, celebrated together when fortune smiled. Adam watched her from across the town square, pride evident in his expression as she charmed the townsfolk. Sheriff Wilson, standing beside him, followed his gaze. "Miss Richards seems to be settling in well," the sheriff observed. "Town's lucky to have found such a qualified teacher." "She's remarkable," Adam agreed. "Adapts to whatever life throws at her, including you," Wilson asked with a knowing smile. "Word gets around, Jenkins. Half the county's noticed how often you're seen riding together." Adam shrugged, unapologetic. "Nothing improper about courting a lady. So it's official then. You're courting Miss Richards." Before Adam could answer, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive Eastern suit, who approached them with a purposeful stride. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm looking for Miss Eleanor Richards. I was told she might be here today." Adam tensed instinctively. "Who's asking?" Charles Harrington from Boston. "Miss Richards and I have personal business to discuss." The name hit Adam like a physical blow. This was Eleanor's former fiancé, the man who had given her an ultimatum, who had made her choose between love and family duty. What was he doing in Silvercreek? Before Adam could respond, Sheriff Wilson intervened smoothly. "Miss Richards is over by the refreshment table, Mr. Harrington." "The lady in the blue dress." Charles thanked him and moved purposefully through the crowd. Adam started to follow, but Wilson placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Let her handle this, Jenkins. Woman like that doesn't need rescuing from a conversation." "You don't know what that man did to her," Adam growled. "Maybe not, but I know the look of a woman who can stand her ground." Wilson nodded toward Eleanor, who had just noticed Charles approaching. Even from a distance, Adam could see her straighten, her chin lifting in that determined way he'd come to recognize. Eleanor had been enjoying a lemonade and conversation with several of the town's matrons when a familiar voice behind her froze her mid-sentence. "Eleanor, thank God I've found you." She turned slowly, disbelief giving way to shock as she confirmed that Charles Harrington, impeccably dressed and looking utterly out of place among the casual Western attire surrounding him, was indeed standing before her. "Charles." Her voice was remarkably steady, considering the turmoil within. "What are you doing in Colorado? Looking for you, of course." He glanced around, frowning slightly at their audience. "Is there somewhere we might speak privately?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded curtly. "We can walk toward the church. Ladies, please excuse me." As they moved away from the crowd, Eleanor was acutely aware of curious eyes following them and of one particular pair of blue eyes that she knew would be watching with concern. "You look well, Eleanor," Charles said once they were beyond easy earshot of the celebration. "Country living seems to agree with you. What do you want, Charles? You made your position quite clear in Boston." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I was wrong, Eleanor. I spoke in anger without understanding what your father's death meant to you. By the time I realized my mistake, you had already left. So you followed me across the country. How did you even find me? Your aunt received a letter from you mentioning Silvercreek. When I called on her, she reluctantly shared the information." Charles reached for her hand, which Eleanor deftly moved beyond his reach. "Eleanor, I've come to bring you home, to make things right between us." Eleanor stared at him, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The handsome face, the confident bearing, the assumption that his desires would naturally align with reality, all qualities that had once impressed her now seemed merely the trappings of privilege without substance. "There is no right between us anymore, Charles. You made your choice and I made mine. A choice made in grief and haste," he argued. "You can't seriously intend to remain in this wilderness." He gestured dismissively at the town around them. "Teaching children of farmers and shopkeepers, living in a repaired flood ruin. This isn't the life you were meant for, Eleanor." "You have no idea what life I was meant for," Eleanor replied, anger rising. "In the months I've been here, I've learned more about myself, about real strength and community, than in all my years in Boston society." Charles's expression hardened. "This is about that rancher, isn't it? I've seen how he watches you. Has he filled your head with romantic notions of frontier life?" "Adam Jenkins has shown me what it means to face challenges directly, to build something meaningful with one's own hands, to value people for their character rather than their social position." Eleanor's voice rose slightly. "And yes, there is something between us, something honest and real that never existed in our engagement, Charles. You can't be serious." Charles looked genuinely shocked. "Eleanor, you're an educated woman from a respectable family. He's a cowboy. He's a man of integrity and courage, which is more than I can say for someone who would issue ultimatums to a grieving woman." Eleanor took a deep breath, calming herself. "Charles, you've wasted your journey. I'm not returning to Boston, not now, not ever. My life is here now. With him." Charles demanded, glancing toward Adam, who remained watching from a distance. "With or without him, that's for us to determine. But yes, I hope with him." The clarity of this realization struck Eleanor forcefully. She did want a future with Adam Jenkins, wanted it with a certainty that made her previous engagement seem like a pale imitation of true commitment. Charles studied her face, finally recognizing the futility of his mission. "You've changed, Eleanor." "Yes," she agreed simply. "I have." Without another word, Charles turned and walked away, his rigid posture the only indication of his wounded pride. Eleanor watched him go, feeling not triumph but a quiet relief, the final closing of a chapter that had already ended in her heart. She turned to find Adam standing nearby, his expression a mixture of concern and question. With steady steps, Eleanor walked to him, aware that much of the town was witnessing this moment but beyond caring what they might think. "Are you all right?" Adam asked quietly when she reached him. "Never better," Eleanor replied and impulsively took his hand in hers. "Dance with me, Adam." His surprise gave way to a slow smile. "Here, now, the dancing doesn't start until evening. I don't want to wait." Eleanor's eyes held his, conveying meanings beyond her simple words. "I think we've waited long enough, don't you?" Understanding dawned in Adam's face. Without releasing her hand, He led her toward the town square where musicians were just beginning to set up for the evening festivities. A word to the fiddler, a quick conference among the band members, and suddenly the first notes of a waltz filled the afternoon air. Adam drew Eleanor into his arms, and they began to dance alone at first, then joined by other couples as the unexpected music proved irresistible. They moved together with natural grace, as if they had danced together all their lives. "Your Boston gentleman looked unhappy," Adam observed, unable to completely hide his satisfaction. "Former gentleman," Eleanor corrected. "He came to bring me back, and will you go?" The question was asked lightly, but Eleanor felt the tension in Adam's arms as he awaited her answer. "My home is here now," she said simply. "With you if you'll have me." Adam's steps faltered momentarily, then resumed with renewed confidence. "Eleanor Richards, are you proposing to me?" She laughed, the sound bright and joyous above the music. "I'm suggesting you might consider proposing to me, Adam Jenkins, before some other frontier rancher recognizes what you've apparently been slow to claim." Adam's answering laugh drew curious glances from nearby dancers. "Claim?" "Like a mining stake, precisely." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with mischief and deeper emotions. "I believe I've been available for claiming since a certain cowboy carried me through flood waters." The music drew to a close, and Adam held Eleanor slightly away from him, his expression sobering. "I've been cautious because I wanted you to be sure, Eleanor, to choose this life and me for the right reasons, not from necessity or gratitude." "I am sure," she said softly. "I choose you, Adam Jenkins, not because you rescued me, but because every day since has shown me the man you truly are." Adam's hands tightened on hers. "Then I'll speak to Reverend Phillips today, arrange for the banns to be read." "So quickly?" Eleanor teased, even as her heart leapt at his certainty. "I've waited nearly 40 years to find you, Eleanor. I don't intend to waste another day now that I have." Their second kiss was witnessed by half of Silvercreek, prompting good-natured cheers and a few raised eyebrows among the more conservative townspeople. Eleanor and Adam hardly noticed, too absorbed in the promise of their shared future to concern themselves with propriety. The wedding took place in early September, just before the start of the school term. It was a simple ceremony in Silvercreek's small church, attended by the entire community. Eleanor wore a dress of pale blue silk, a peace offering from her aunt in Boston, who had written to express her support for Eleanor's new life, despite Charles Harrington's unflattering account of her Western exile. Adam stood tall and proud at the altar, wearing a new suit that Mrs. Foster had insisted upon, though he drew the line at exchanging his well-worn boots for store-bought shoes. His ranch hands served as groomsmen, while several of the town's young women, already friendly with Eleanor through church activities, stood as her attendants. "I take you, Eleanor, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Adam's deep voice carried clearly through the packed church. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." As Eleanor repeated her vows, she felt the rightness of this moment not as an ending to her journey, but as the true beginning of the life she was meant to live. When Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, the applause that erupted spoke to how thoroughly the community had embraced their union. The celebration continued at Whisper Creek Ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and a dance floor constructed for the occasion. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Eleanor and Adam moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes from neighbors and friends. "Mrs. Jenkins," Adam murmured as they finally found a moment alone, standing at the edge of the festivities. "How does it sound?" "Wonderful," Eleanor replied honestly, "though my students will still call me Miss Richards for simplicity's sake. As long as you come home to me as Mrs. Jenkins, they can call you whatever they like." Adam's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "I still can't quite believe you're mine." "Believe it," Eleanor assured him, resting her head against his chest. "Though I think we each belong to this land as much as to each other. It shaped us both, brought us together. Poetic thoughts from my practical wife. I contain multitudes, Mr. Jenkins. You'll discover them all in time." Adam kissed her then, a promise of discoveries to come, of a lifetime's exploration of the person he had chosen and who had chosen him in return. Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were truly alone for the first time, Eleanor stood by the bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit landscape of Whisper Creek. Adam moved behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Eleanor turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "Only that we didn't meet sooner. Think of all the years we might have had." "We have now," Adam reminded her, "and all the years ahead." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, drawing his head down for a kiss that held both tenderness and passion. "We have now." 5 years later, Eleanor stood in the doorway of Whisper Creek Ranch, watching as Adam taught their 3-year-old son, Timothy, to sit on his first pony. Their daughter, Sarah, just a year old, balanced on Eleanor's hip, clapping her tiny hands as her brother giggled with delight. The years had brought changes to their lives, a new, larger house built where the original ranch house stood, the successful expansion of Adam's horse breeding program, the growing reputation of Eleanor's school. They had decided Eleanor would continue teaching even after the children came, hiring Mrs. Foster's niece as a nanny to help during school hours. Eleanor's father's homestead had been converted to a comfortable guest house, occasionally rented to travelers or used when family visited from the east. Eleanor's aunt had made the journey twice now, gradually warming to Western life despite her initial reservations. The flood that had nearly claimed Eleanor's life was now a distant memory, though each spring when the snow melted and the creeks rose, she and Adam would ride to the high ridge overlooking the valley, a ritual of remembrance and gratitude for the waters that had, in their destruction, created the path to their happiness. "Mama, look," Timothy called as his pony took a few careful steps under Adam's watchful guidance. "I'm riding like Papa. I see you, brave boy," Eleanor called back, her heart full. Adam looked up, meeting her eyes across the yard, his smile still having the power to quicken her pulse after all their years together. Later, with the children asleep and the day's work complete, Adam and Eleanor sat on the porch of their home, a habit they had maintained since those early days of cautious courtship. The valley spread before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset, Whisper Creek's waters catching the dying rays like scattered diamonds. "I received a letter from Sheriff Wilson today," Adam said, his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "Charles Harrington's bank in Boston failed last month. Apparently he made some unwise investments." Eleanor sighed. "I'm sorry to hear that. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish misfortune on him." "Your generous heart is one of the many reasons I love you," Adam said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Wilson mentioned Harrington might be heading west to make a fresh start. Seems the frontier is still the place for second chances." "It was for us," Eleanor agreed, "though I'd call what we found more of a first chance at real happiness." Adam nodded, his thoughts turning to that stormy day when he'd ridden out against his foreman's advice, drawn by some inexplicable certainty that he was needed. Finding Eleanor standing in that flooded field had altered the course of his life in ways he could never have imagined. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't ridden out that day?" he asked. Eleanor considered the question. "I believe we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are too important to leave to chance." "Is that your educated opinion, Mrs. Jenkins?" "It's my heart's certainty, Mr. Jenkins." Eleanor turned in his embrace, the love in her eyes as clear and deep as it had been on their wedding day. "Some loves are written in the stars, or perhaps in our case, in the waters that brought us together." Adam's answer was a kiss that spoke of present joy and future, promises a kiss that tasted of home and hope, and the enduring love that had begun when a cowboy rode through flood waters to rescue a woman who, in saving herself, had ultimately saved him as well. As night fell over Whisper Creek Ranch, Adam and Eleanor Jenkins held each other close, secure in the knowledge that whatever storms life might still bring, they would weather them together, two souls who had found in each other the courage to begin again, the strength to build something lasting, and the wisdom to recognize true love when it appeared, even in the most unlikely circumstances. "I love you, Eleanor," Adam whispered against her hair, "today and always." "And I love you," Eleanor replied, her voice steady with the certainty that had guided her from that flooded field to this moment of perfect belonging. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow." Around them, the night settled gently over the valley they both called home, stars appearing one by one in the vast Colorado sky, witnesses to a love that had begun in crisis but flourished in the fertile ground of mutual respect, shared dreams, and the daily choice to build a life together, come what may. And in the distance, Whisper Creek continued its eternal journey through the land, its waters carrying away the past while nourishing the promise of all that was yet to come.